G'day YouTube, I am back with a video on my #1 accessory for drones, and that is filters. I've been shooting both personally and professionally with drones now for over 3 years, and that actually makes me kind of an old man in the drone world. Whenever I'm packing my drone or heading out the door with it, my #1 no excuse accessory I always either buy or have with me for my drone is filters. This is a collection of most of the filters I own, which I'm using on my Inspire X3 and X5 camera, and I also use these filters on my Osmo camera. If you break it all down, the #1 reason I use filters when shooting drone video is to get your shutter speed down to more acceptable or normal levels for shooting video. And by that I mean you're using the ND filters to get your shutter speed back down to normal levels for shooting video. When I say normal levels, the standard accepted frame rates for shooting video, for example, if you were shooting in 30 frames a second in the NTSC countries, your standard shutter rate would be 1/60th. Here in the PAL country, such as New Zealand, if I'm shooting at 25 frames a second, my standard shutter speed is 1/50th. However, if you're using a drone without a filter, the cameras are often too sensitive, and when I'm shooting at 25 frames a second, I might have to set a shutter speed of 1/250th to get the exposure down to a proper level. So the solution is putting filters or ND filters on your camera, and you can think of these as perhaps as sunglasses for your lens. And the ND filters come in a range of strengths, if you like. I was going to say sizes, but it's actually strengths. For example, this collection, this pack here is from Polar Pro, and it is, funny enough, the clue is in the name. It's called the Shutter Collection, and it comes with an ND8, an ND16, and an ND32. And these were the filters that I had for the Phantom 4 Pro, which I tested in the last video. My go-to filter when shooting video outdoors on a sunny day on my drones, and it's been the same with my Inspire X3 and X5 camera, is the ND8 filter. This will generally allow me to get my shutter speed back down to 1/50th of a second or slightly above. I don't mind if it's slightly above when shooting at 25 frames a second. However, if I'm shooting drone stills, which I often do on real estate jobs with my trusty drone, I will ditch the ND8 and I will go for the circular polarizer filter. Because the shutter speed, actually a high shutter speed is a good thing when you're shooting stills to try and eliminate any motion blur or shake that the camera's getting. So I don't mind that my shutter speed is snuck back up again. But what a circular polarizer does, it helps you get a little bit more bluer blues and greener greens. So that is my go-to filter when shooting drone stills. However, just a quick word of warning when shooting with circular polarizers and doing stills with your drone. And people will know this if you've used circular polarizers, and it depends on, I couldn't tell you the exact ratios, but it depends on the angle of the sun to the angle of the camera when shooting with your polarizer, how much polarizing or deep blues you're going to get. And you want to watch it because it'll be darker in one corner than the other. I recently had a job where the client asked me to shoot some panoramas and then stitch the photos together. So I was shooting perhaps 5 or 6 stills and then stitching them together in Adobe Lightroom. However, if I had the polarizer on, I'd have an unnatural blue in each corner, which is really hard to stitch. So I ended up taking the polarizer off. So I had an even sky, which made it a lot easier to stitch all the photos together. However, in order of priority, I've mentioned ND filters are my go-to filter, and then I use the circular polarizer for stills. But also, don't forget your clear filter. I always run a clear filter on my camera if I'm shooting in low light, and that is essentially, you can get a UV filter, which helps, but I essentially use it as a lens protector, because sometimes if you land and take off perhaps in sand or loose gravel, you can get scratches on your lens, so that is lens protecting. Another word of warning, not all filters are created the same. I have tried a variety of different filters from different manufacturers, and I've kind of come to settle in on the Polar Pro series. They seem to make a good quality product, which I have now for my Inspire X5 camera, the X3 camera, and my Osmo. When I first got my Inspire, I got these cheap filters. They weren't that cheap, but these were very new to the market, and initially they worked right in the winter, but as we got into summer, we have quite a high UV content here down here in the south of New Zealand, and I noticed a color cast, and unfortunately sometimes cheap filters can give you a color cast when shooting, so I ended up ditching those for the Polar Pros. So here's a quick example of the drone. I've got it powered on here, and I don't have any filters on the lens. So to get the correct exposure for this shot, I've had to set it at 200th of a second, which is way too fast for my video. Now if you see here, if I do this, you can see it's sort of quite staticky and very unnatural looking. I'll change that filter over now and put the ND8 on to get my shutter speed back down. Okay, I've now got my ND8 on there. Now I'll just set the exposure for what I think is correct. And you can see here, it's actually right on the money. I can get a 1/50th of a second shutter speed running at 25 frames a second. And if you look at my hand again, it should be more of a natural motion blur. And that is why ND filters are my #1 accessory for shooting good video or shooting correctly exposed and motion blurred type video.